Now, if you're not sure at all what all this means, you're like, okay, I don't want to choose this type of stuff. I don't really get what this means. I don't really want to deal with it, and I don't have the time for it. Tailored WealthSaver, guess what tomorrow is? Armed Forces Day. What does that mean? It's a day for us to say thank you and sincerely give back to a community that gives us so much, our military. As a result, we're dedicating this Financial Friday around Thrift Savings Plan directly to our service members. TSP allows service members to save for retirement and also civil servant in form of a 401k, but instead it's called TSP. TSP is huge. In my opinion, one of the top 3 benefits of serving in the military is the ability to have a thrift savings account. TSP alone has some of the lowest maintenance fees ever. Actually, I would arguably say it has the lowest maintenance fees. Here's why I say that. In 2019, last year, the average expense fee paid for TSP was 42 cents for every $1,000 invested. So if someone had $100,000 invested in TSP, they had a maintenance fee of $42 for the entire year. That's it. And again, that is on average. Now that we have understand the maintenance fees and how low they are, let's dive into some of the fun options available in TSP, which are pretty diverse. The first fun option is going to be known as the G Fund. I call a glorified savings account. It is short-term treasury bills from the government. They are updated one time per month. The F Fund is a bond fund. So what that is literally like an IOU from an organization to a person. So example, organization says, hey, I need $500. And a person says, well, I'll give you $500. Just make sure you pay it back. The organization will say, okay, I'll pay you back the $500 over the course of 5 years with a 10% interest rate to say thank you. That's a bond. One of the ways that TSP keeps their maintenance fees extremely low is because they do something called passive managed accounts. What that means is that the fund options outside of the G Fund, so the F, C, S, and I, which we're going to talk about, they are passively managed. So the F Fund represents the Bloomberg Barclay U.S. Aggregate Bond Index. The C Fund represents the S&P 500. It's 500 of the top companies in the U.S. stock market. Pretty simple. That's the S&P 500. Here's an example of the S&P 500 over the past 6-month return as of yesterday, 14 May 2020. And you'll see what the returns are. Do you recognize any of these companies listed up here? I'm sure you can recognize Apple or Facebook or Microsoft or JP Morgan Chase. These are part of the companies that are included on the S&P 500. The C Fund is updated one time a day to represent pretty close and mirroring what the S&P 500 does. That's what we mean by passively managed accounts. Now let's talk about the next fund option, which is going to be the S Fund. So the S Fund represents the Dow Jones Completion Index. And you may say, the Dow Jones? No. We are not talking about the Dow Jones. We are talking specifically about the Dow Jones Completion Index. What that mutual fund has is what we call small cap companies in the U.S. stock market. So these are not going to be your top 500 companies, but a lot of these companies are focused primarily on growth. Remember, the S&P 500 is 500 of the top companies in the U.S. stock market. Those companies are already at the top. They're more or less trying to sustain their growth. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Completion Index, they're trying to grow more. The next fund option that we're going to talk about is the I Fund. The I Fund passively represents the Morgan Stanley EAFE Fund, which is Europe, Australia, Asia, and Far East. One of the risks involved with the I Fund, which you can tell is international stocks, is one, you have to think about currency conversion, and then 2, inflation. So those are the 2 things you have to think about a little bit more than you do with the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones Completion Index, which represents the C and S fund within TSP. Now, if you're not sure at all what all this means, you're like, okay, I don't want to choose this type of stuff. I don't really get what this means. I don't really want to deal with it, and I don't have the time for it. That is okay. There's something available called the Lifecycle fund options. As you can see, what the Lifecycle fund option allows you to do is basically a target date fund. So it takes all the fund options that are available and it adjusts them quarterly based upon the maturity date. So this example right here shows Lifecycle 2050. As you can see, this fund is pretty aggressive when it first started out. However, if you take a look, over time, you will notice to reach its maturity, the G fund is practically fully the account. But you'll see that there's also room for growth still, with the other fund options still being a part of the fund. In July 2020, this year coming up, soon there will be an introduction of Lifecycle 2060 and a new feature that will allow the Lifecycle funds to actually have 5-year increments. So instead of it being Lifecycle 2030, 2040, 2050, and new 2060, it'll be 2050, 2055, 2060, and 2065. That's a great addition as well. Because TSP is a retirement account, it does still have the same options of having the Roth versus traditional options that you can choose from of what works best for you. If you want to learn more about that, take a look at this recap video to see the Roth versus traditional. What are the difference between the two? One thing to know, with blended retirement, which has been introduced to the military as of 1 January 2018, there is the option to have something called a defined contribution, which means that the government will match your contribution that you put into your TSP account up to your first 5%. That first 5% can be matched based upon the base pay only, not any special pays. If the government matches your 5%, let's say you put in 5% in either Roth or traditional, the government will match your 5% and it will go into the traditional side, regardless if you're contributing Roth or traditional. It always has to go to the traditional side. That's just an IRS tax code. So anyone who has an employer contribution, that basically where your employer is matching what you're putting in, that has to go in to the traditional side of your account, regardless if you're contributing Roth or traditional. It's just an IRS tax code. Next week, we're going to talk about compounding interest. And the reason why is because compounding interest is such a great topic, and this is the reason why we want to start getting into TSP early. For all of our service members currently serving the military, past, present, and soon to be in the future, on behalf of Tailored WealthSaver, we would like to say thank you. Thank you for taking the oath to honorably serve our country. Thank you for honorably serving our country. And most importantly, thank you so much for every sacrifice you have made. I sincerely mean that. I do not think the military can hear enough thank you for your service. So in honor of Armed Forces Day, we salute you with my horrible salute, but would like to say thank you for your service.